Welcome! Today we are diving into a concept that might just change the way you read ancient texts forever. We're calling it Scripture's Hidden Hyperlinks.
You've probably heard these words before. They're some of the most famous and, frankly, most haunting words in the entire Bible. Spoken by Jesus from the cross, they really sound like the cry of a man who's been completely and utterly abandoned.
But what if that's not the whole story? What if we've been hearing it with modern ears and completely missing the point? What if this wasn't a cry of defeat at all, but a clue, a hint, pointing to a radically different story?
To solve this mystery, we first have to understand a huge difference: the gap between how we read a book today and how an ancient audience would have experienced that very same text.
See, for you and me, reading is usually a quiet, private thing. But in an ancient oral culture, it was the exact opposite. Scripture was a public, shared experience. People didn't just own their own copy. They heard it read aloud, they argued about it, and they memorized huge chunks of it. This created a shared cultural memory, where just one phrase could instantly bring a whole story to everyone's mind. And that, right there, changes everything.
So to bridge that gap between their world and ours, let's use a modern idea. Think of it like a hyperlink on a web page. The biblical authors were embedding their own kind of hyperlinks into their writing. When they quoted a single line, they were really opening a portal to a much bigger idea.
And this wasn't just some clever literary trick. It was a well-known Jewish teaching method called remez, which literally means hint. The whole point was to use a short, memorable hint to make an entire story with all of its emotional power and context come rushing back into the listener's memory.
So when a speaker in the New Testament quotes a line from the Old Testament, it's not just to prove a point, it's a hyperlink. They fully expect their audience to mentally click on that phrase and see the entire original story it came from. The quote is a portal.
All right, so let's try it. Let's go back to that cry from the cross and actually click the link. Let's see where that portal takes us.
Now here's the kicker. In the ancient world, Psalms didn't have chapter and verse numbers like our Bibles do today. You know how they were identified? By their first line. It was like the title of a song. So when Jesus shouted these words, anyone in that crowd who knew their scriptures would have had an instant moment of recognition. He wasn't just saying a sentence, he was naming a song.
And if you go and read the rest of Psalm 22, you find this incredible narrative journey. Yes, it absolutely starts with pain, suffering, and being mocked by enemies, but it doesn't end there. The psalm takes a sharp turn towards trust, it looks forward to God's rescue, and it ends, and this is key, with a massive declaration of God's ultimate triumph and vindication for the whole world to see.
So, do you see what was happening? By quoting that first line, Jesus was invoking the entire psalm. He was basically saying to everyone who had ears to hear, I know this looks like the end, it feels like I'm being defeated, but you know how this story goes. This is Psalm 22. The suffering comes first, but vindication and victory are coming next. It's a statement of triumph right in the middle of agony.
And once you see this hyperlink technique, you just can't unsee it. It is everywhere in the Bible. This wasn't a one-off thing. It was one of the main ways the authors built layers of meaning into their stories.
Take Jesus' temptation in the wilderness. The 40 days is an obvious parallel to Israel's 40 years, but look closer. Every single time Jesus answers Satan, he's quoting from the book of Deuteronomy. And he's not just pulling random verses. Each quote is a hyperlink to a specific moment where the nation of Israel was tested in the desert and failed. Jesus is essentially reliving their story, but he's getting it right.
Sometimes the authors built entire books to function as a giant hyperlink. The Gospel of Matthew, for instance, is deliberately structured to mirror the life of Moses and the story of the Exodus. I mean, look at these parallels: a tyrant king killing babies, a rescue into Egypt, a journey through water, and the giving of a new law on a mountain. Matthew is practically screaming at his audience, this is the new and greater Moses. This is the new Exodus.
And the sheer number of these connections is just staggering. Get this. The book of Revelation alone has more than 600 of these allusions, these hyperlinks, back to the Old Testament. That's an average of multiple connections in every single chapter. It's not a book of new ideas, it's a masterpiece woven from the threads of all the stories that came before.
So what's the big takeaway from all this? Well, it means we might need to adjust how we think about the Bible. We need to stop seeing it as just a simple, linear book to be read from cover to cover.
It's really a dense, deeply interconnected network of meaning. It's a web where every story, every character, and every prophecy echoes and sheds light on all the others. And seeing this doesn't just add a fun fact, it fundamentally changes the whole reading experience, revealing one unified story from beginning to end.
Ultimately, learning to spot these hidden hyperlinks transforms the flat words on a page into a three-dimensional world of meaning. It invites us to stop being passive readers and become active explorers, always asking the exciting question, what other connections are just waiting to be clicked?